Full disclosure, this video is not sponsored or endorsed by GEICO or any of its affiliates. This is an independent analysis of one of the most brilliant marketing campaigns of all time. It was the year 2000 and American television was in chaos. A massive Screen Actors Guild strike had paralyzed Hollywood. Commercials, which relied on famous faces and familiar voices, couldn't be produced. For most companies, it was a disaster. But for one struggling insurance agency, it was the luckiest break in advertising history. Because in a desperate, last-ditch creative meeting, someone asked a question so absurd it should have gotten them fired. The question was, what if we just used a talking lizard? That single desperate idea didn't just save a commercial. It launched a cultural phenomenon. It created a character so famous that today, that little green lizard is recognized by 90% of Americans. To put that in perspective, that's a higher recognition rate than most cabinet members, senators, and A-list celebrities. He is, without exaggeration, one of the most famous public figures in the United States. And he doesn't exist. This isn't just a story about a cute mascot. This is the story of how a tiny, niche insurance company, on the brink of obscurity, used a combination of brilliant psychology, calculated risk, and a voice actor from a forgotten sitcom to dominate one of the most competitive industries on the planet. Over the next few minutes, you are going to learn the secret playbook they used. We're going to deconstruct how they turned a simple pun into a billion-dollar brand, why his British accent was a masterstroke of psychological manipulation, and how this animated reptile fundamentally changed the rules of advertising forever. By the end of this video, you won't just know the history of the GEICO Gecko. You'll understand the blueprint for creating an American icon from thin air. To understand the genius of the gecko, you have to understand just how boring insurance was in the 1990s. The industry was a gray, faceless monolith. Commercials were all the same. A serious man in a suit standing in front of a family, promising security and peace of mind. The major players were Allstate, with its deep, authoritative voice promising you're in good hands, and State Farm, the friendly, reliable neighbor. They were institutions. They were safe. They were also incredibly dull. And then there was GEICO. Most people had never even heard of them. The name itself, GEICO, stands for Government Employees Insurance Company. For decades, that's exactly who they were. They were a quiet, respectable company that sold car insurance almost exclusively to federal employees and high-ranking military officers. They didn't need flashy ads because their customer base was so specific. But in the mid-90s, everything changed. GEICO decided to go national to offer insurance to everyone. And they hit a brick wall. They had two massive problems. First, their name was a meaningless acronym to the general public. It had no emotional connection. It sounded like a tech company or a government agency, not a brand you trust with your family's safety. The second problem was even worse. Nobody could pronounce it. People were constantly calling them, asking for Gecko insurance. The name was a constant point of friction, a daily annoyance for their call center employees. The company was spending millions on ad buys, only to have potential customers get confused by the very first thing they heard. It was a branding nightmare. In 1999, they handed this nightmare to a Richmond, Virginia ad firm called the Martin Agency. The mission was simple but seemingly impossible: make America remember the name GEICO and make them care. The creative team, led by a man named Steve Bassett, threw everything at the wall. They tried humor. They tried sincerity. They tried everything the big guys were doing, but it just wasn't cutting through the noise. They were just another voice in a sea of beige. The initial results were fine, but they weren't revolutionary. GEICO was still a nobody. Then the strike happened. In May of 2000, the Screen Actors Guild, the union representing over 135,000 actors, went on strike over payment for cable TV commercials. Suddenly, you couldn't hire a recognizable actor. You couldn't even use a professional voiceover artist for a national spot. The entire talent pool vanished overnight. Ad agencies across the country panicked. How do you sell a product without a human being? For the Martin Agency, this constraint became a catalyst. They were forced to get weird. The team was brainstorming in a conference room, trying to figure out how to make a commercial with no actors, when someone brought up the recurring problem: the mispronunciation. People keep calling us Gecko. And in that moment of frustration, creative director Steve Bassett sketched a crude drawing of a lizard on a napkin. A thought bubble above its head read, "I'm a gecko, not to be confused with GEICO." It was a joke, a silly little doodle born from a shared annoyance. But then the idea started to gain traction. What if the mascot wasn't just a mascot? What if he was the solution to their biggest problem? What if they took the single most confusing thing about their brand and personified it? They could have a gecko walk into a press conference annoyed and say, "Look, I'm a gecko. Stop calling me. I can't save you money on car insurance. GEICO can." It was simple. It was direct. And in a world without human actors, it was possible. Computer-generated imagery, or CGI, was just becoming affordable and realistic enough for television commercials. They wouldn't need an actor in a suit. They could build him from scratch. The pitch to GEICO was a massive gamble. Remember, this was an era of serious, trustworthy spokesmen. The Martin Agency was proposing that a company selling financial security should be represented by a cartoon lizard. It was a radical departure from everything the industry believed about marketing insurance. Most executives would have laughed them out of the room, but GEICO was desperate. They were spending a fortune on advertising with little to show for it. They were still the company nobody could pronounce. So they said yes. They approved a single 15-second test spot. The problem was, now they had to actually create him. And more importantly, they had to decide what he should sound like. That decision, more than any other, would be the one that turned a clever ad into a cultural legend. The question of the gecko's voice was the single most important creative challenge the Martin Agency faced. Get it right, and you have a charming brand ambassador. Get it wrong, and you have a creepy talking reptile trying to sell you insurance, a fast track to failure. The late 1990s ad world was a noisy, chaotic place. It was the era of shouting pitchmen, loud rock music, and commercials that felt like they were grabbing you by the lapels. The creative team knew they couldn't win by being louder. They had to be smarter. They had to be different. Their solution was a brilliant piece of counter-programming. Instead of shouting, their character would be calm. Instead of being an aggressive salesman, he would be a thoughtful, slightly world-weary professional. And to achieve that, they looked across the Atlantic. There's a long-standing psychological shortcut in American advertising: the British accent. To the American ear, it can sound sophisticated, intelligent, and trustworthy. It's the voice of Shakespeare, of BBC documentaries, of James Bond. It carries an inherent authority and a touch of class that makes you lean in and listen, rather than reach for the remote. The agency decided their little green lizard would be British. But British isn't one single accent. Is he the Queen of England? A Beatles-esque Liverpudlian? A stuffy Oxford professor? Each choice would create a radically different character. The initial direction was to lean into the sophisticated, masterpiece theater vibe. They wanted a voice that was well-known, that could bring instant recognition and a bit of star power to this bizarre concept. So they went out and got one of the most recognizable, sophisticated, and beloved voices of the era. For their very first test commercial, the one that ran for a short time to see if the idea had legs, the GEICO Gecko was voiced by none other than Kelsey Grammer. Yes, Frasier Crane. That impeccably articulate, slightly pompous, but undeniably charming baritone was the very first voice of the gecko. In that initial spot, the gecko is at a press conference, standing at a tiny podium, exasperatedly clarifying, "This is my final word on the matter. I am a gecko, not to be confused with GEICO." Grammer's performance was exactly what you'd expect. Polished, professional, and very, very funny. It worked. The test was a success. The concept was proven. They had their character, they had their star, and they were ready to roll out a national campaign. And then disaster struck. In May of 2000, the Screen Actors Guild, or SAG, went on strike. It was a massive labor dispute that brought Hollywood, and by extension the advertising world, to a grinding halt. Commercial production shut down across the country. For GEICO and the Martin Agency, it was a catastrophe. Their brand new mascot, voiced by a major celebrity, was suddenly unusable. Union rules meant Kelsey Grammer couldn't record any new lines. Their campaign was dead on arrival. It was a crisis that forced them back to the drawing board, but it would become the single greatest thing that ever happened to the character. The celebrity voice, they realized, had a subtle downside. When you heard Kelsey Grammer, you thought, "That's Frasier as a lizard." You didn't just hear the gecko, you heard the famous actor playing the gecko. The strike forced them to find a non-celebrity, a voice actor who could simply be the character, without the baggage of a famous persona. The search began again, but this time they weren't just looking for a British accent. They were looking for the gecko's soul. This is where the creative direction took a critical turn. Instead of the high-class, received pronunciation of an actor like Grammer, they started exploring more grounded, regional British accents. They auditioned dozens of actors, listening for something that felt more authentic, more relatable. And then they heard it. The audition tape from an English actor named Jake Wood. Wood didn't sound like a Shakespearean actor or a member of the royal family. He had a touch of what's known as an estuary English accent, with hints of Cockney. It wasn't posh, it was popular. It was the voice of the London everyman. It was friendly, grounded, and had a slightly cheeky working-class charm. It was the voice of someone you'd meet in a pub, not a palace. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. This was the brilliant subversion that would make the character iconic. America expected a British accent to be snooty. They expected a talking lizard to be weird or alien. This voice was neither. It was down to earth. It was approachable. It immediately demolished the barrier between the strange CGI creature on the screen and the person watching at home. He wasn't a corporate mascot talking down to you from on high. He was a regular bloke just trying to get through his day. The new voice fundamentally reshaped the gecko's personality. He was no longer just a sophisticated creature correcting a misunderstanding. He was now a put-upon professional, a blue-collar guy in a green-collar body. He had a history, a perspective. The slight weariness in his voice suggested a long, frustrating career of being confused with an insurance company. The subtle wit suggested he was smart enough to be annoyed by it, but professional enough to tolerate it with a sense of humor. He felt real. With Jake Wood's voice, the gecko wasn't just a gimmick anymore. He was a fully fledged character. He had anxieties. He had a job to do. He had a point of view. This transformation from a clever concept into a relatable personality was everything. The Martin Agency now had their secret weapon. They had a character that was visually unique, conceptually brilliant, and now, thanks to a voice born from a crisis, emotionally resonant. They had solved the problem of what he should sound like. Now came the even bigger challenge: unleashing him on the entire country. The campaign was ready. The gecko was ready. But the question remained: would America fall in love with the talking lizard from London? The entire future of the GEICO brand was about to ride on the answer. The year is 2000. The world is tentatively stepping into a new millennium, still slightly jittery from the Y2K bug that wasn't. The internet is a dial-up symphony of shrieks and whistles, and the dot-com bubble is beginning to show its first terrifying cracks. In this landscape, television isn't just a screen in the living room. It's the cultural campfire. It's the central nervous system of American life, and its lifeblood is the 30-second commercial. And on one unremarkable evening, during a commercial break for a show most of us have long forgotten, it happened. A tiny green computer-generated lizard appeared on millions of screens. He stood at a podium addressing a crowd of reporters, and with a calm, sophisticated, and distinctly British accent, he spoke. He wasn't selling. He was pleading. He was asking people to please stop calling him because he was a gecko, not GEICO. In the war rooms of the Martin Agency and the boardrooms of GEICO, you could have heard a pin drop. This was it. The culmination of a wild idea, a voice actor strike, and a multi-million-dollar bet. They watched and they waited. The initial reaction wasn't a tidal wave. It was a ripple. A collective nationwide. Wait. What was that? People weren't sure what they had just seen. A talking lizard? For car insurance? With a British accent? It was bizarre. It was confusing. And that confusion was the first spark of genius. Because in a world of loud, fast-talking car salesmen and jingles designed to be earworms, the gecko was a question mark. He didn't yell. He reasoned. He didn't promise the world. He politely clarified a misunderstanding. He made you stop and think, and in the brutal, attention-starved world of advertising, making someone stop and think for even a second is a monumental victory. The phones at GEICO didn't immediately melt. The website servers didn't crash. But something else began to happen. A slow organic burn. People started talking about it. Did you see that weird lizard commercial? It became a water cooler conversation, a piece of pop culture trivia. The genius wasn't just in the lizard, it was in the execution, and the single most important element of that initial execution was the voice. The voice of that first gecko was none other than Kelsey Grammer. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't some unknown voice actor. This was Frasier Crane. At the time, Frasier was one of the most popular and critically acclaimed sitcoms on television. Grammer's voice was synonymous with wit, intelligence, and a kind of sophisticated, high-strung charm. It was a voice America invited into its living room every week. It was familiar. It was trusted. And now that same voice was coming out of a tiny lizard. The cognitive dissonance was brilliant. It was like having a Shakespearean actor read the phone book. The gravitas and intelligence of the voice instantly elevated the character from a simple cartoon to something more. He wasn't a goofy mascot. He was a distinguished gentleman who just happened to be a reptile. This choice single-handedly prevented the gecko from being dismissed as a childish gimmick. It gave him an air of authority and credibility that was completely at odds with his appearance, and that friction created an unforgettable hook. The character himself was a masterstroke of psychology. He wasn't a salesman. In fact, in his first appearances, he was actively trying not to be associated with the company. He was an unwilling participant, a victim of circumstance due to a phonetic mix-up. This made him instantly relatable and, more importantly, trustworthy. He wasn't trying to push a product down your throat. He was just a regular bloke, a gecko with a problem. This approach is called disarming the consumer. By presenting a character who wasn't overtly selling, GEICO bypassed the audience's natural defense mechanisms against advertising. We weren't being sold to, we were being let in on a joke. The gecko was on our side. His problem, the constant mistaken phone calls, was a clever narrative device to hammer home the company's name. GEICO, GEICO, GEICO. He'd say it with a hint of exasperation, and in doing so, he drilled the brand name into the national consciousness more effectively than any jingle ever could. And then there was his Britishness. To the American ear, a British accent often carries connotations of intelligence, class, and dry wit. It's the accent of Shakespeare, of James Bond, of Monty Python. By making the gecko British, the Martin Agency wasn't just giving him a voice, they were giving him a prepackaged personality. He was worldly. He was unflappable. He was the calm, rational voice in the chaotic world of car insurance. This was a direct and deliberate strategy to reposition the GEICO brand. Before the gecko, GEICO was primarily known as the government employees insurance company, a low-cost provider for a niche market. They needed to go mainstream, but they didn't want to sound cheap. The gecko, with his polished London accent, made saving money sound smart and sophisticated, not just frugal. He was the perfect bridge, making a budget-friendly brand feel premium. These elements, the celebrity voice, the reluctant salesman persona, the sophisticated British charm, combined to create a perfect storm. But it all served one ultimate purpose: to deliver the message. And the message was brutally simple and effective. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. This line would become one of the most iconic taglines in advertising history. The gecko wasn't just there to be cute. He was the sugar that made the medicine go down. The topic of car insurance is, let's be honest, incredibly boring. It's a world of deductibles, premiums, and liability coverage. It's a necessary evil that no one enjoys thinking about. The gecko's job was to take this dry, uninteresting topic and make it palatable, memorable, and even entertaining. He made the call to action, spending 15 minutes to get a quote, seem like a small, reasonable request from a very charming lizard, rather than a chore. The tipping point came quickly. The initial confusion and curiosity blossomed into genuine affection. The gecko started showing up in different scenarios, always with the same calm demeanor, gently reminding people of the brand's core promise. The campaign's success was staggering. In the first few years of the gecko's existence, GEICO's customer base doubled. Then it tripled. They went from a relatively obscure insurer to a household name, a titan of the industry, all on the back of a tiny green reptile. He wasn't just selling insurance anymore, he was a star. He had broken through the fourth wall of advertising and had become a legitimate piece of American pop culture. But with this meteoric rise came a new, and potentially devastating problem. The very voice that had defined the character, the voice of Kelsey Grammer, was the voice of an A-list, primetime television star. And stars like that are expensive. As the campaign exploded and the demand for more and more gecko commercials grew, the cost of keeping Grammer as the voice was becoming astronomical. GEICO and the Martin Agency were at a crossroads. They had created an icon, but the soul of that icon was tied to a famous, and famously expensive, actor. Could the gecko survive without the voice that made him famous? They were faced with an impossible choice. Either pay a king's ransom to keep the original voice, or risk everything by recasting their golden goose, potentially alienating the very audience that had fallen in love with him. The character's future, and the brand's continued success, hung precariously in the balance. The Martin Agency, the creative force behind the gecko, was caught in an impossible position. On one side, a powerful union demanding fair compensation for its talent. On the other, a beloved character whose very essence was tied to a single specific voice. To change it felt like sacrilege. To keep it would mean capitulating to demands that could set a new, expensive precedent for all ad campaigns moving forward. It was a high-stakes game of creative chicken, and GEICO was driving. The decision they made was both pragmatic and incredibly risky. They decided to recast. The search for a new voice was a monumental undertaking, a clandestine operation to find a vocal needle in a global haystack. The casting call was discreet but specific. They weren't just looking for an English accent, they were looking for a soul. They needed someone who could replicate the charm without being a cheap imitation. Someone who could embody the character's intelligence and wit, but perhaps bring something new to the table, something that would justify the change. Audition tapes poured in from London, New York, and Los Angeles. Seasoned voice actors, theatrical performers, and up-and-coming talent all took a shot at becoming the new voice of America's favorite lizard. Each one was scrutinized, analyzed, and compared against the gold standard set by Kelsey Grammer. Too posh, too common, too old, too young. The feedback was relentless. The creative directors were looking for a specific alchemy of sound and personality, and for weeks, it seemed impossible to find. Then, a tape arrived from an English actor named Jake Wood. Now, to American audiences, that name meant absolutely nothing. But in the UK, Wood was a well-known face, a star on the long-running gritty soap opera EastEnders. He played a character named Max Branning, a wheeler dealer, a bit of a scoundrel, known for his fast-talking charm and a distinct working-class London accent. It was a world away from the sophisticated, almost theatrical delivery of Kelsey Grammer. Wood's voice wasn't a product of the Royal Shakespeare Company. It was the sound of the London streets. It was authentic, grounded, and had a natural conversational rhythm. It was a gamble, a massive one. Choosing a famous, award-winning American actor doing a posh accent was one thing. Choosing a relatively unknown British soap star with a Cockney accent was a completely different strategy. It wasn't a replacement, it was a reinvention. The Martin Agency and GEICO made the bold choice. They went with Jake Wood. And in doing so, they executed one of the most brilliant and subtle character pivots in advertising history. They didn't just swap out the voice and hope no one would notice. They leaned into the difference. The transition was seamless. One day, the Gecko was speaking with the polished, upper-crust diction of Fraser Crane. The next, he was speaking with the friendly, approachable lilt of a London cabbie. And here's the genius of it. Most of America didn't consciously register the change. They just felt it. The character suddenly felt closer, more accessible. Let's break down why this worked so perfectly. Kelsey Grammer's Gecko was an observer. He was witty, sophisticated, and a little bit aloof. He was like a charming guest at a dinner party, commenting on the absurdity of it all from a comfortable distance. He told you that GEICO could save you money, and you believed him because he sounded smart and trustworthy like a well-educated financial advisor. But Jake Wood's Gecko was a participant. He was your mate. He was in the trenches with you. His more common, salt-of-the-earth accent changed the entire dynamic of the commercials. He wasn't talking at you anymore. He was having a chat with you. The message was the same. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance, but the delivery system was completely different. It was less of a sales pitch and more of a friendly tip, a piece of good advice shared over a pint. This shift from a posh, received pronunciation accent to a more estuary, almost Cockney accent was a masterstroke of cultural translation. For American audiences, who often can't distinguish the subtle class differences between various British accents, the change simply registered as still British but friendlier. The new Gecko felt less like a corporate mascot, and more like a helpful friend who just happened to be a lizard. This newfound relatability unlocked a whole new universe of comedic possibilities. The writers could now place him in more everyday, American situations, and his grounded, slightly bewildered reactions felt more authentic. He could be stuck in a traffic jam, dealing with a noisy neighbor, or trying to understand the rules of American football, and his commentary felt genuine because he sounded like a regular bloke, completely out of his element but taking it all in stride. The public reaction was minimal, which in itself was a massive victory. Sure, on the nascent internet forums of the early 2000s, you'd find a few threads titled, "Did the GEICO Gecko's voice change?" But there was no backlash, no outrage. The transition was so smooth, and the new performance so compelling, that audiences simply accepted it. Jake Wood wasn't just imitating a character, he was inhabiting it, and he made it his own. For the next 10 years, his voice became synonymous with GEICO. He recorded hundreds of commercials, his vocal cords becoming one of the most valuable assets in the American insurance industry. He was the constant reassuring presence across radio, television, and online ads. The character, now imbued with this everyman charm, exploded in popularity. He wasn't just a clever ad anymore. He was a legitimate piece of pop culture, a comforting and familiar part of the American media landscape. The risk had paid off beyond anyone's wildest dreams. The Gecko was no longer just a successful campaign. He was an institution. The partnership between GEICO and Jake would seem unbreakable, a perfect fusion of corporate branding and character performance that would surely last forever. But in the world of high-stakes advertising, nothing is forever. And while the first major crisis had been averted, a new storm was gathering on the horizon. This time, the conflict wouldn't be fought in boardrooms or union negotiations. It would be fought in public on social media, for the entire world to see, threatening to expose a bitter dispute that could tarnish the friendly lizard's reputation for good. The first whispers of trouble didn't come from a press release or a major news network. They trickled out, as these things often do, in the niche corners of the advertising world. A short, cryptic article in Ad Age, a blind item in a trade magazine. The language was cautious, full of sources say, and it is alleged, but the message was unmistakable. There was a major disagreement between GEICO, the Martin agency, and the voice of their star mascot. And then the name dropped: Kelsey Grammer. For most of America, the reaction was a collective, "Wait, what? Frasier Crane?" The sophisticated, often pompous, but ultimately lovable radio psychiatrist from Seattle. Was the GEICO Gecko? Seemed impossible. The voices were so different. Grammer's iconic baritone was world-famous, while the Gecko's accent was a chipper, working-class Londoner. But the pieces started to click into place. The union dispute, the timing, the sheer audacity of it. And once the confirmation came, the floodgates didn't just open. They were blown off their hinges by a tidal wave of public opinion. The story that emerged, painted primarily by sources close to Grammer, was a classic tale of corporate hardball. It wasn't just about money, they claimed. It was about respect. Grammer, a titan of television, a classically trained actor, had helped breathe life into this character, making it a cultural phenomenon. And now, as the story went, he was being unceremoniously dismissed, lowballed, and replaced over a contract negotiation that, in the grand scheme of GEICO's billion-dollar ad spend, amounted to pocket change. The internet, a place that runs on outrage and loves a good David versus Goliath story, immediately chose its side. The hashtag started trending within hours. #NotMyGecko. It was a digital rallying cry. Suddenly, social media was flooded with memes. A picture of Frasier Crane looking dismayed with the caption, "I'm listening," to offers from Progressive. Clips of Grammer's most famous monologues were redubbed over Gecko commercials. The comments sections on GEICO's official Facebook and YouTube pages became a war zone. Every new ad they posted, featuring the familiar lizard but now with an unsettlingly different voice, was met with a barrage of angry comments. "Bring back Kelsey. This new guy sounds like a cheap knockoff. I'm switching to Allstate until you fix this." It was a public relations cataclysm. The Martin agency and GEICO were caught completely flat-footed. They operated in a world of focus groups, market research, and carefully controlled messaging. They understood demographics and ad buys, but they had fundamentally misunderstood the emotional connection the audience had forged with the character, and by extension, the voice that gave him life. They thought the Gecko was the star. They were wrong. The performance was the star. They believed the character was an interchangeable corporate asset, a friendly green face they owned outright. But the public saw him as a beloved figure, and they viewed this move as a betrayal. GEICO's initial response was a masterclass in corporate clumsiness. They released a sterile, jargon-filled statement about evolving the brand and exploring new creative directions. To the public, this translated to, "We got cheap and thought you wouldn't notice." It was like pouring gasoline on a raging fire. The controversy tapped into a deep-seated American resentment towards faceless corporations. Here was a beloved actor, a familiar presence in people's living rooms for decades, being pushed around by a massive insurance company. It didn't matter that Kelsey Grammer was a multimillionaire celebrity. In this narrative, he was the underdog, the wronged artist. The Gecko, this symbol of friendly, accessible insurance, was suddenly becoming a symbol of corporate greed. Every time he appeared on screen, he was no longer a charming salesman. He was a reminder of the ugly public firing of the man who made him famous. The very thing designed to make GEICO seem relatable was now making them seem ruthless. Inside the boardrooms, panic was setting in. This wasn't a contained issue that could be ignored. It was a viral sensation that was actively damaging the brand's reputation with every retweet. The media frenzy was relentless. Entertainment news shows ran segments on it. Late-night talk show hosts made jokes about it. It had crossed over from an advertising industry squabble into a full-blown pop culture event. The core of the problem was a paradox of their own making. They had succeeded too well. They had created a character so beloved, so real to people, that the public felt a sense of ownership over him. They had spent hundreds of millions of dollars convincing America to trust this little green lizard. And now America was using that trust to demand justice for the actor who had been his soul. The Martin Agency was in an impossible position. Their client, GEICO, was hemorrhaging goodwill. Their creation, the Gecko, was becoming toxic. They had to make a choice. Do they double down, ride out the storm, and hope the public's notoriously short attention span would move on to the next outrage? Or do they wave the white flag, go back to the negotiating table, and pay Grammer whatever he wanted, setting a dangerous precedent for all future talent negotiations? There was a third option, the one they ultimately chose, but it was the riskiest of all. To find a new voice, a permanent replacement, and pray that they could somehow recapture the magic. They had to sever the character's identity from the controversy. To do that, they needed to find someone who could not only mimic the accent but also embody the spirit of the character, all while stepping into the shoes of a beloved and very publicly fired predecessor. It was more than a casting call. It was a rescue mission. They weren't just looking for an actor. They were looking for a de-escalation specialist, a vocal magician who could make the entire country forget the bitter fight that had brought them there. The search began in secret, a frantic high-stakes hunt for the next voice of the Gecko. They listened to hundreds of auditions, searching for that perfect blend of charm, wit, and warmth. But with every audition tape they played, the ghost of Kelsey Grammer loomed large. His performance had defined the character so completely that any other voice felt like an imposter. The company was at a crossroads. Either find a way to silence the storm, or risk their iconic lizard becoming a symbol of corporate greed, his charming accent forever tainted by the bitter taste of betrayal. The silence from GEICO and the Martin Agency was deafening. Behind the scenes, it wasn't silence, it was panic. They had spent millions and years building a character that was now on the verge of becoming radioactive. Every day the story lingered, the narrative hardened. A beloved character, voiced by a hard-working actor, had been tossed aside by a faceless corporation. It didn't matter if the details were more complicated. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was already in. The Gecko was a sellout. Imagine the meetings. Rooms full of executives and creatives, staring at storyboards for commercials they could no longer make. Their star was in exile. The original voice, Kelsey Grammer, was a non-starter. His celebrity status and the associated costs were the entire reason this mess had started. Going back to him would be admitting defeat and setting a precedent they couldn't afford. Trying to find a perfect sound-alike for Grammer would be just as disastrous. The internet would spot it in a nanosecond, and the headlines would write themselves. GEICO tries to trick you with fake Gecko. They were trapped. Their character was too famous to kill, but too controversial to use. The solution had to be radical. It had to be subtle. They couldn't just replace the voice. They had to recast the character. They needed someone who could capture the essence of the Gecko, the charm, the wit, the inherent trustworthiness, without being a direct copy. They needed a voice that felt familiar enough not to be jarring, but different enough to be its own thing. A voice that could, over time, overwrite the memory of the old one. Most importantly, they needed an actor, not a celebrity. Someone who would become known as the Gecko, not a famous person playing the Gecko. This distinction was everything. It would insulate the character from the grubby world of contract negotiations and celebrity drama. The Gecko needed to be real, and celebrities by their very nature are not. The casting call was quiet, almost secretive. They weren't looking for the next big star. They were looking for a quintessential British voice, but not the high society, masterpiece theater accent of Kelsey Grammer. They needed something more grounded, more authentic. The kind of voice you'd hear in a London pub, not at a garden party. A voice that could talk about something as mundane as car insurance and make it sound like friendly advice, not a sales pitch. Audition tapes poured in from British actors, many of them established performers in the UK, but virtual unknowns in the United States. And then, one of those tapes stopped everyone in their tracks. It was from an actor named Jake Wood. To British audiences, Wood was a familiar face, best known for his long-running role as the womanizing schemer Max Branning on the wildly popular soap opera EastEnders. He was the furthest thing from a posh, sophisticated lizard. He was known for playing a gritty, working-class character. His natural voice wasn't the Queen's English. It was what's known as estuary English, the accent of London and the Southeast. It's a bit rougher around the edges, more approachable, more real. And that was the magic. When Jake Wood read the lines, he didn't try to imitate Kelsey Grammer. He didn't put on airs. He just was the Gecko. His delivery had the same cleverness, but it was grounded in a new kind of authenticity. This wasn't a well-to-do lizard condescending to talk to you about your insurance. This was your mate, a little green guy who just happened to have some good info for you. The accent was still charmingly British to American ears, but the class distinction was gone. The Gecko had gone from upper crust to working class hero. It was a stroke of genius. The Martin Agency and GEICO had their man. Now came the most dangerous part, the switch. How do you introduce a new voice for one of the most recognizable characters in the country without anyone noticing? Or more accurately, without anyone caring? They made a calculated gamble, one of the riskiest in modern advertising history. They decided to say nothing. No press release. No announcement. No grand unveiling. They just did it. Sometime in the mid-2000s, new GEICO commercials started airing, and the Gecko just sounded a little different. For the vast majority of the audience, the change was imperceptible. It was like seeing a friend who got a slightly different haircut. You know something is off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. The accent was still British. The cadence was still friendly. The character was still the Gecko. The core components were all there. But the vocal DNA had been subtly rewritten. The internet, of course, noticed. Message boards and early blogs lit up with threads titled "Gecko's voice changed?" Or, "Is it just me? Or does the GEICO lizard sound different?" But because GEICO never acknowledged the change, there was no central story to latch onto. There was no "GEICO fires actor" headline. There was only speculation. Without a corporate statement to confirm or deny, the controversy had no oxygen. It was a phantom debated by advertising nerds and die-hard fans, but it never broke through to the mainstream consciousness. GEICO had successfully performed open-heart surgery on their brand in public, and the patient never even knew it was on the operating table. This silent transition was a masterclass in public relations. They understood a fundamental truth about audiences. We care about the character, not the actor. By making the switch seamless and quiet, they allowed the audience's affection for the Gecko to override any lingering questions about the voice. And Jake Wood's performance was key. His take on the character was, frankly, more sustainable. Grammer's sophisticated Professor Lizard was a great novelty, but Wood's every lizard was a character you could build a universe around. He wasn't just there to deliver a clever line. He was a problem solver, a friend, a reassuring presence in a world of confusing insurance options. The voice of Jake Wood became the voice of the Gecko. For an entire generation, he is the only voice they have ever known. The transition was so successful that today, the fact that the Gecko was ever voiced by anyone else is little more than a trivia question. The crisis was over. The storm had been weathered. By replacing a celebrity with a character actor, GEICO had not only saved their mascot, but had inadvertently made him stronger, more relatable, and more enduring than ever before. The Gecko was no longer just a clever gimmick born in a writer's room. He had survived his first existential threat. He had evolved. Now, with a stable identity and a voice that resonated with millions, the Martin Agency could finally unleash his full potential. The era of the Gecko was just beginning. They were about to take their little green spokesman and build an entire world for him to live in, transforming him from a simple mascot into a true cultural fixture. To do this, the Martin Agency made a critical decision. They were going to treat the Gecko not as a cartoon but as a real working actor. A celebrity spokesman who just happened to be a 6-inch-tall lizard. This meant giving him a life, a personality, and a backstory that existed outside the 30 seconds he spent talking about insurance. The first step was solidifying his identity, and that started with his voice. While Dave Kelly had established the charming British persona, the agency wanted a voice that felt more permanent, more grounded. They found it in English actor Jake Wood. Wood's voice wasn't just any British accent. It was distinctly Cockney. This was a stroke of genius. A posh, upper-crust accent might have come across as condescending or aloof, but a Cockney accent? That's the sound of the London working class. It's gritty, it's authentic, and it carries an inherent sense of no-nonsense street smarts. It's the voice of someone who knows the value of $1, or in his case, £1, and wouldn't try to pull a fast one on you. This subtle shift was monumental. The gecko was no longer just a British lizard. He was a specific kind of British lizard. One who felt more like a friendly cab driver giving you a good tip than a corporate shill reading a script. He was approachable. He was one of us. With the voice locked in, they started building his world. The commercials stopped being just about the gecko explaining GEICO's savings. Instead, we started seeing glimpses into his life. We saw him in his office, a tiny little workspace where he was clearly the boss. We saw him at press conferences, fielding questions from reporters like a seasoned politician. One of the most iconic early spots of this era has a reporter ask him, "People find the accent to be very charming. Is it true you're from?" And before he can finish, the gecko cuts him off, saying with a hint of exasperation, "Look, I'm a gecko. I'm not from anywhere." It was brilliant. It was meta. It acknowledged the absurdity of the situation while simultaneously making him feel more real. He had a backstory he was tired of explaining, just like any real person. This was the new formula. Place the gecko, our calm, rational, and slightly world-weary center, into absurd, relatable human situations. He became the ultimate straight man. The world around him could be chaotic, but he remained the voice of reason. Think about the commercials where he's navigating everyday annoyances. He's stuck in a traffic jam, lamenting that he's sweating like a hog, even though he's a reptile. He's in a hotel room trying to get some sleep while a noisy party rages next door. He's trying to make a business call while a ridiculously loud lawnmower buzzes outside his window. These scenarios did two things masterfully. First, they created an immediate connection with the audience. Who hasn't been stuck in traffic or kept awake by a noisy neighbor? We saw our own minor frustrations reflected in this little green guy, and it made us like him more. He wasn't some untouchable celebrity. He was dealing with the same mundane problems we were. Second, it allowed the sales pitch to feel natural, almost like a piece of friendly advice. He'd be in the middle of some annoying situation and then pivot, saying something like, "Well, at least I know my car insurance is simple," making the switch to GEICO feel like the one easy thing in a complicated world. The Martin agency then doubled down on the gecko as a real actor concept. They started running commercials that were styled like behind-the-scenes documentaries or DVD extras. We saw him in the makeup chair, getting touched up before a shoot. We saw him talking to his agent on the phone. We saw him reading his lines, messing up, and having a laugh with the crew. This meta-narrative was revolutionary for advertising. It broke the fourth wall in a way that didn't feel like a gimmick. Felt like an invitation. We were being let in on the joke. We were part of the gecko's inner circle. This created a level of brand loyalty and affection that was unheard of. People weren't just watching a commercial. They were checking in with a beloved television personality. They fleshed out his character with incredible detail. He was professional but with a dry wit. He was confident but humble. He was a global traveler, but he appreciated the simple things. In one ad, he's talking to his bookie on a tiny cell phone, whispering about betting on the ponies. This single 5-second gag added an entirely new layer to his personality. He has hobbies. He has a private life. He might even have a slight gambling problem. It made him a three-dimensional character, not a two-dimensional cutout. The animation also evolved to match this new depth. The early gecko was impressive for its time, but by the mid-2000s, the CGI had become flawless. His movements were fluid and natural. His facial expressions were nuanced. You could see the subtle flicker of annoyance in his eyes or the slight smirk at the corner of his mouth. He could convey more with a single glance than most human actors could with a full page of dialogue. He felt physically present in the real world, which made his emotional reality that much more believable. This combination, a specific, trustworthy voice, a relatable everyman personality, a straight man comedic structure, and a meta-narrative that treated him like a real celebrity, was the perfect storm. The gecko wasn't just selling insurance anymore. He was a fixture of American pop culture. People would quote his lines. They'd talk about the latest commercial around the water cooler. He was becoming more than a mascot. He was an icon, recognized and beloved in nearly every household in the country. GEICO and the Martin agency had successfully built him a world. Now they were about to populate that world with a whole cast of new characters, creating an advertising universe that would rival Marvel and DC, and in the process, change the entire landscape of brand marketing forever. The Martin agency had cracked the code. They had taken a simple transactional service car insurance and given it a soul. But in the relentless, high-stakes world of advertising, success is a moving target. The very thing that makes a mascot beloved ubiquity is also its greatest threat. See a character too often, and charm curdles into annoyance. Familiarity breeds contempt. The gecko was a certified star, but GEICO couldn't risk him becoming the advertising equivalent of a one-hit wonder who overstays his welcome at the party. They needed more. They needed an ensemble. They needed a universe. And their first new recruit wasn't a cute animal or a friendly spokesperson. It was a direct descendant of primordial man. The idea was born from a classic American idiom. So easy a caveman could do it. It's a simple, effective way to communicate ease of use. Most companies would have left it there. They would have shown a stereotypical, grunting caveman fumbling with a club before easily using their product. But the Martin agency asked a different question. A much more interesting question. What if the cavemen were still around? And what if they were, well, a little sensitive about the stereotype? What followed was a stroke of comedic genius. The first commercial features two impeccably dressed, articulate, modern men, who just happened to be cavemen, watching a GEICO commercial with the "so easy a caveman could do it" tagline. They are not amused. One turns to the other and says with wounded dignity, "Not cool." Suddenly, the joke wasn't on the caveman. It was on the company making the ad. GEICO was making fun of its own advertising within its own advertising. It was meta, it was subversive, and it was hilarious. These weren't the club-wielding brutes of our imagination. These were sophisticated urbanites. They played squash, they went to therapy, they struggled with the prejudices of the modern world. In one ad, a caveman is on a moving walkway at an airport, sighing as he passes the very GEICO ad that insults him. In another, a caveman brings his non-caveman girlfriend home to meet his equally sophisticated cave parents, creating a brilliant parody of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. They were a minority group facing constant, casual discrimination from a society that saw them as a simple punchline. And America fell in love with them. The campaign's brilliance was that it tapped into a universal human experience, the frustration of being stereotyped. Everyone at some point has felt misunderstood or unfairly judged. The cavemen became unlikely avatars for that feeling. We sympathized with them. We rooted for them. And in doing so, we formed an even deeper emotional connection with the brand that, ironically, was the source of their fictional misery. The slogan was a masterclass in psychology. It did its job, telling you GEICO's website was easy to use, while simultaneously creating a rich, comedic narrative that made you forget you were being sold something. The campaign was so unbelievably popular, so ingrained in the cultural zeitgeist, that Hollywood came calling. In 2007, ABC Television greenlit a sitcom called Cavemen, based on the GEICO characters. This was unprecedented. Brand mascots had sold merchandise, they'd appeared in parades, but they had never, ever been the basis for their own primetime network television show. It seemed like the ultimate validation of GEICO's creative strategy, and it was a colossal failure. The show was critically panned and canceled after just 6 episodes. The magic, it turned out, was contained in the 30-second format. The problem was that the entire joke of the GEICO caveman was based on a single brilliant premise: sophisticated guys who are offended by a stereotype. In a commercial, that's a perfect, self-contained comedic sketch. But when you stretch that premise to fill a 22-minute episode week after week, it collapses under the weight. The mystery was gone. The crisp social satire of the commercials became a clumsy, drawn-out allegory for racial prejudice that satisfied no one. The failure of Cavemen taught GEICO and the entire advertising industry a valuable lesson. The power of a brand character exists in the carefully controlled world of the brand. Take them out of that context and the spell is broken. But GEICO didn't retreat. The lesson they learned wasn't to stop creating characters. It was to create more of them, each living within their own 30-second world. The floodgates opened. Suddenly, the GEICO ad break became a variety show of comedic concepts, a sprawling universe of characters all vying for America's attention. There was Maxwell the talking pig, a character whose entire existence was based on one, incredibly simple, incredibly viral joke. A pig in a car using a GPS gleefully squealing wee 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 all the way home. It was juvenile, it was silly, and it was impossible to forget. Then came the Rhetorical Questions campaign, featuring a suave, smooth-talking Mike McGlone, who would pose questions like, "Does a 10-pound bag of flour make a really big biscuit?" The tone was completely different, witty, dry, and sophisticated. It was the polar opposite of a squealing pig, designed to appeal to a totally different comedic sensibility. And who could forget the camel? On a dreary Wednesday in an office, a camel named Caleb walks around, joyfully reminding everyone what day it is. Hump Day. It was an ad that didn't just sell insurance, it became a cultural ritual. For years, the Hump Day commercial became a meme, shared across social media every single Wednesday, giving GEICO millions of dollars in free advertising week after week. They introduced a stack of cash with googly eyes, personifying the money you could be saving. They had a woodchuck who couldn't chuck wood. They had little Richard celebrating over a bowl of peaches. The list goes on and on. What looked like a chaotic, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks approach was actually a calculated and revolutionary strategy. GEICO was essentially running a massive nationwide A/B test 24/7. They weren't betting the farm on a single mascot or a single campaign. They were running multiple, wildly different campaigns in parallel. This served two critical purposes. First, it completely eliminated the problem of ad fatigue. If you got tired of the gecko's charm, a few minutes later you'd get the caveman's satire. If that wasn't your cup of tea, you'd get the pure silliness of the Hump Day camel. GEICO wasn't just a single channel. It was a cable package with a comedy for every taste. You didn't just see one GEICO ad. You experienced the GEICO block. Second, it allowed them to connect with a much broader audience. The person who loves the gecko's dry British wit might not be the same person who loves Maxwell the pig's simple charm. By diversifying their comedic portfolio, GEICO ensured that they had a character, a joke, or a concept that could land with virtually any demographic. And through it all, every single one of these disparate, seemingly disconnected narratives funneled back to the same two things: the GEICO logo and the simple, unforgettable promise. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. The characters were the story, but the tagline was the moral. The gecko, the caveman, the camel, they were all just different, brilliantly creative tour guides, leading you to the exact same destination. GEICO wasn't just building a brand anymore. They were building a mythology, an entire comedic ecosystem where the only law of nature was that saving money on insurance was a very, very good idea. And this ecosystem had a gravitational center, a sun around which all these other comedic planets orbited. That sun, of course, was the gecko. But as his star rose, a fundamental change was about to happen. A change so subtle, many people didn't notice it at first, but one that would cement his identity forever. It was a change in his very voice. You see, for the first few years, the gecko was voiced by the acclaimed actor Kelsey Grammer. Think Frasier Crane. That voice was sophisticated, articulate, with a touch of posh, upper-class British charm. It worked. It established the gecko as an intelligent, trustworthy creature, a stark contrast to his small, unassuming appearance. But behind the scenes, a classic Hollywood story was unfolding: contract negotiations. As the gecko's popularity exploded, so too did the demands of his famous voice actor. The Martin Agency and GEICO were faced with a choice: pay a king's ransom to a celebrity, or take a massive gamble. They chose to gamble. They parted ways with Grammer and began a search for a new voice. This was an incredibly risky move. The voice was the character. Changing it could have been a disaster, like recasting a beloved main character in the middle of a hit TV show. The audience could have rejected it completely, but the voice they found, belonging to British actor Jake Wood, didn't just save the character, it perfected him. Wood's accent was different. It wasn't the Queen's English of Kelsey Grammer. It was Cockney. It was the sound of working-class London. It was grounded, friendly, a little bit cheeky. Suddenly, the gecko wasn't just a sophisticated spokesman anymore. He was one of us. He was a bloke you'd meet down at the pub. He was your savvy, down-to-earth buddy who just happened to know a great way to save you some cash. This shift was seismic. It democratized the character, making him infinitely more relatable to a broad American audience. That Cockney charm became a cultural cheat code. In the United States, a British accent often carries an innate, almost subconscious association with intelligence and trustworthiness. But the Cockney flavor added a crucial ingredient: authenticity. He wasn't talking down to you from some ivory tower. He was on your level, sharing a helpful tip, mate. This new and improved gecko became the anchor for an advertising empire that was now operating on a level of psychological sophistication that few brands have ever achieved. They were tapping into deep-seated cognitive principles, whether intentionally or not. First, there was the mere exposure effect, a simple psychological phenomenon where people tend to develop a preference for things merely because they are familiar with them. GEICO's media budget was so colossal, their ad placement so relentless, that the gecko, the caveman, and the hump day camel became as familiar as members of our own family. We saw them every commercial break, every YouTube pre-roll, every sporting event. We couldn't escape them, and through sheer repetition, our brains began to associate them with a feeling of comfort and familiarity. But it went deeper than that. GEICO mastered the art of creating what psychologists call a parasocial relationship. This is the one-sided relationship that audiences form with media figures, whether they're fictional characters or real-life celebrities. We know they don't know us, but it feels like they do. The gecko was the ultimate parasocial pitchman. He looked directly into the camera speaking to you. His tone was always calm, never yelling, never desperate. In a world of loud, obnoxious advertising, his quiet confidence was a bomb. He wasn't a salesman, he was a friend. He wasn't pushing a product, he was offering a solution. Over thousands and thousands of 15 and 30-second interactions, we built a decade-spanning relationship with a CGI lizard. We trusted him. And while the gecko built that trust, the surrounding campaigns built the humor and memorability. They were employing another powerful psychological tool, the von Riestorff effect, also known as the isolation effect. This principle states that an item that stands out is more likely to be remembered than other items. In a block of car commercials featuring sweeping shots of mountain roads and insurance ads with somber families looking at paperwork, a screaming pig on a zip line or a camel celebrating Wednesday is an extreme anomaly. It jolts your brain out of its passive viewing state. You remember the absurdity, and by extension you remember the brand attached to it. GEICO was now a two-pronged attack on the American consciousness. The gecko was the consistent, trustworthy foundation, the reassuring voice that built the core brand identity of easy and reliable. The rotating cast of comedic characters was the shock and awe campaign, creating viral moments and cultural catchphrases that kept the brand at the absolute forefront of pop culture. Think about the Hump Day ad. It didn't just sell insurance, it literally changed the way millions of people referred to Wednesday. It became a national inside joke. Offices everywhere echoed with Mike, 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 Mike. This wasn't advertising anymore. This was cultural programming. The brand achieved a state of ubiquity that is the holy grail for any company. They were no longer just an insurance provider. They were a content creator, a reliable source of bite-sized entertainment in between segments of our favorite shows. People didn't just tolerate GEICO ads. In many cases, they actually looked forward to them. They would ask, "Have you seen the new GEICO commercial?" That question is the sound of an advertiser winning the game. They had transcended the transaction. They weren't just competing with Progressive or Allstate anymore. They were competing with sitcoms and late-night talk shows for our attention and affection. This was the peak of the GEICO empire, an ecosystem of characters, led by a charming Cockney-accented lizard, all reinforcing one simple message, wrapped in layers of sophisticated psychological triggers and genuinely funny comedy. They had cracked the code, creating a perpetual motion machine of brand awareness. The gecko wasn't just a mascot. He was a media celebrity in his own right. He had a backstory, a distinct personality, and a level of public trust that most politicians would kill for. He had become a fixture of the American landscape, an unblinking animated face of corporate success. But this raises a much bigger question. It's one thing to be successful, to sell a lot of insurance policies. It's another thing entirely to become an icon. How did this happen? What is the secret ingredient that transforms a clever marketing tool into a genuine, lasting piece of Americana? And what does the gecko's journey from a forgotten sketch to a national treasure truly tell us about ourselves? The secret ingredient, the alchemy that turns a sales pitch into a saga, isn't a single element. It's a carefully crafted cocktail of consistency, character, and comfort. And the GEICO Gecko is the master bartender. First, let's talk about consistency. In the chaotic flavor-of-the-week world of advertising, the gecko is an anchor. Think about it. For over 2 decades, while other brands have cycled through dozens of campaigns, celebrity spokespeople, and high-concept ideas that burn out in 6 months, the gecko has just been there. He's been there through different presidents, through economic booms and busts, through the rise of social media and the fall of traditional television. This relentless presence creates something more powerful than brand awareness. It creates a sense of permanence. He's not just a character in a commercial. He's a fixture of the American media landscape, as reliable and expected as the Super Bowl halftime show or the ball drop on New Year's Eve. In a world that changes at lightning speed, we crave constants. The gecko is a constant. He is the calm, familiar voice that assures us that some things, like saving money on car insurance, remain straightforward. But consistency alone is boring. A rock is consistent, but it doesn't sell insurance. That's where the second ingredient comes in: character. The gecko isn't a one-dimensional cartoon. He has evolved. The early, slightly agitated gecko who was annoyed at being mistaken for the company has mellowed into a suave, witty, and endlessly patient philosopher of finance. He's the perfect blend of traits. His British accent gives him an air of intelligence and sophistication, a classic American trope for, "This person sounds smart." Yet, his small stature and friendly demeanor make him completely approachable. He's not talking down to you from an ivory tower. He's sitting with you at a diner, explaining things in a way that makes perfect sense. He is, in essence, the ideal guide. He's knowledgeable but not arrogant, charming but not slick, persistent but not pushy. He embodies a rare kind of competence that we all wish we could find in every aspect of our lives. He doesn't just promise a good deal. His entire personality suggests that he is the good deal. Sensible, reliable, and hassle-free. This brings us to the final, and perhaps most important ingredient: comfort. The world is a complicated and often stressful place. The last thing anyone wants is an insurance commercial that adds to that stress. The gecko's universe is a safe one. The humor is gentle, clever, and observational. It's never mean, never political, never divisive. It's the kind of humor you could watch with your kids or your grandparents without anyone feeling uncomfortable. In an increasingly fragmented and polarized nation, the gecko is one of the few things everyone can generally agree on. He's like a warm cup of tea on a cold day, soothing, familiar, and universally pleasant. He operates in a world where the biggest problem is that saving money is surprisingly easy, and his job is to gently remind you of that fact. He sells peace of mind, not just by offering insurance, but by creating a 30-second oasis of calm and lightheartedness in a sea of breaking news alerts and dramatic television. So, what does this reptilian icon truly tell us about ourselves? It tells us that as a culture, we are starved for simplicity and reliability. We reward brands that don't just shout at us but speak to us. We elevate characters who feel less like salespeople and more like trusted friends. The gecko's journey from a sketch to a cultural staple is a testament to the power of long-term thinking. GEICO didn't chase trends, they built a relationship with the American public, one calm, witty, and consistent commercial at a time. He is also, ironically, a perfect American icon precisely because he isn't American. He embodies the friendly outsider archetype. He's the immigrant who comes to this country, observes its quirks and customs with a fond and humorous eye, and ultimately becomes an indispensable part of the community. He understands American life, from our obsession with football to the chaos of a family road trip, but he explains it back to us with a charming, external perspective that makes it all seem a little more manageable. He's not one of us, but he's for us, and that makes him incredibly endearing. In the end, the GEICO Gecko isn't just a mascot. He's a mirror. He reflects our desire for a world that is a little bit simpler, a little bit funnier, and a lot more dependable. He's a case study in how to build an enduring legacy not with flash and fireworks, but with quiet confidence and unwavering presence. He proved that you don't need to be loud to be heard, and that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that speaks in a calm, reassuring tone. He began his life as a solution to a problem, a simple mispronunciation, a quick fix, but through decades of careful curation, he became something so much more. He became a cultural shorthand for common sense, a symbol of stability in an unstable world. He is the quiet green thread woven through the fabric of American pop culture for a generation. From a typo on a telephone call to a titan of television, the little lizard from London didn't just sell us insurance. He sold us a small recurring dose of order in a world of chaos. And for that, he earned his place not just in the advertising hall of fame, but in the heart of the American identity itself. He is, and will likely remain, the most iconic gecko to ever walk the earth.